They passed through Galilee. Jesus did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, "The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. And after 3 days of being killed, he will rise again." But they did not understand what he was saying, and they were afraid to ask him. Then they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, for on the way they had argued with one another about who was the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." Then he took a little child and put it among them, and taking it in his arms, said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." For this gospel, the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Please sit down. Macy, Freya, Joshua, Scarlett, you've had a bit of notice of this question. Are you important? Do you matter? Are you important? Do you think you're important? Do you think you matter, Scarlett? Yes. You think you're important and you think you matter. Joshua, just need to check this out. You think you matter? You think you're important? Macy, Freya, do you think you're important? Do you think you matter? Yeah? That child we heard about in the gospel reading, if Jesus had asked that same question to the child, would the child have said yes? What do you think? I mean, we don't know because it was 2,000 years ago, but do you think they'd have said yes like you've just said yes? You're not sure. It's hard to think about it. You think yes. I suspect the child might have said, if it was a girl, "I'll be important if I make a good marriage and have children. Then I'll be important." And a boy might have said, "I'll be important if I can grow up and join my father on the land or on the sea fishing or on the land working and then get married and have children of my own. Then I'll be important." When Jesus takes a child and puts the child in the midst of his disciples, it's not an, "Oh, how sweet" moment. That's not what it's about. I don't know about you, but when I was your age, I hated being made to perform. I hated when my parents had friends around you and smiling at me. You know, the poem you learnt at school, do it for your auntie and uncle. I hated things like that. So I don't know how the child felt. But children, it's not that they weren't loved. Children were loved. But out of 10 children, how many of them would have made it to adulthood? How many of those children would have made it to being grown up? About half of them. The rest, in the days before hospitals, in the days before medicine, in the days before skilled, trained doctors, illness, disease, would have taken about half of them. So you might love your children, but you couldn't afford to invest too much in them because they might not make it. And also, when life was hard, your children were important, at least partly because they'd grow up and they'd be able to help you on the farm or the land or the sea, or the girl would make a good marriage and bring a dowry, money in, and possessions. So what Jesus is doing is something intensely radical and very new. And we need to hear that. What Jesus is doing, he's doing because he's heard them behind him on the road to Capernaum, arguing, nudging. I'm more important than you because I was on the mountainside with him when he was like all lit up from within and I was there and you weren't there, so I'm more important. You think you're important? I actually walked on the lake because he told me I could, so I'm obviously more important than you. That's going on. Maybe they think that actually there's a big revolution about to start, and he is going to be riding into Jerusalem on a white horse, and they'll be behind him because they're going to throw the Romans out. And so when his new kingdom starts, where are they going to be? Are they going to be in his cabinet? So what Jesus does is to take a child who might have been very embarrassed and said, whoever wants to be great in the real kingdom has to be like this child. In other words, not very important. In other words, somebody who has things done to you rather than doing them. That's a way in which you and that child of the first century would have had lots in common. Children have things done to you. You're taught, and it's good for you. And you're given your supper and your lunch, and it's good for you. And you're always given advice, even when you don't want it. You have things done to you. When you're grown up, and particularly when you're powerful, or when you're rich, or when you're famous, you get to do things to other people. You get to be in charge. You get to issue the orders. Jesus is saying, in my Father's kingdom, not being so important. Being like a servant. That's what matters. And we know that's true because the word for child and the word for servant in Greek have the same root. Somebody to whom something is done. And that turns the whole story on its head from being Jesus loved children, to being something a bit more uncomfortable. Jesus says, in my Father's kingdom, those who are acted upon like servants, like children, are the ones who really matter. You want to be great disciples? You want to sit in my right hand? Be like that. So what it says to us is, yes, of course you matter. You matter precisely because of God's kingdom. You matter because in God's kingdom, it's people like you, not prime ministers, certainly not deans. No, it's people like you, because you're the ones who show us what Jesus goes on to show us. He kneels down in front of his friends at the Last Supper and washes their feet and dries them. Being a servant, that's what counts. So remember that, so that when you grow up and you become rich and powerful and famous, you never forget in your heart what's important, so that you can make this church a safe place for all God's children. A safe place. Will you try and remember that? Yeah? I hope you lot were listening in.